Well, listen, next time you need some help buying 25, 30 million lottery tickets, give me a buzz. I'll pitch in.
Yeah, exactly. And if you can bring $2 or $3 million in your anorak in physical cash, that will definitely get you a seat on the team.
Sounds like a plan. I'll consult with my banker after we're done here today.
The Business of Betting podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. 4 out of the top 5 U.S. operators personalize player experiences with Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/businessofbetting. And if you like what you see, you will get your first month free.
Welcome back to another edition of the Business of Betting podcast. I am Jeff Edelstein. I'm a senior analyst with ingame.com. I'm joined today by Bernard Marantelli, who's done a little bit of everything and then some when it comes to the gambling world. Bernard, thanks for joining us today.
Jeff, thanks for having me.
So I got to start somewhere where I'm not sure if you've spoken about it publicly, about depending on which side of the aisle you live on, the Texas lottery caper, or how you just were smarter than the average bear to take down tens of millions of dollars. I bring this up as we're recording this. The Mega Millions is up to $965 million. I'm going to ask you if you need a partner in that. But before we get there, tell me about this Texas lottery thing. So for listeners that don't know, back in 2023, the Texas lottery, in-state lottery, got up to $95 million, months and months and months of nobody winning. And then you and your partners saw an opportunity. I'll leave it there if you could just, fill in the blanks on that.
Yeah, look, I think, it was an opportunity that couldn't really be ignored. Every ticket had an immense amount of value, really, because a state lottery that didn't get the publicity and escalation of spend that something like Powerball or Mega Millions had got to a position where the jackpot essentially exceeded the number of permutations and the cost of buying all the permutations. So it was really an opportunity that you could go and you could purchase 1 or 2 tickets, and those tickets would have significant value in them. But if you really wanted to, let's say maximize your EV, expected value, as I'm sure your listeners know and follow closely, the idea was to buy as many or all tickets, if at all possible. So that was the objective. And then obviously that was a logistical complexity and nightmare that might have put most people off. But we decided to have a go at it, and we were ultimately successful.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of yada over the hard part there of actually printing out, what was it, some well over 20 million tickets, right?
If I recall correctly, there was about 25.8 million permutations in the game. There might have been 7 or 8 permutations per ticket, something like that. But yes, you were looking at something like 4 or 5 million physical slips that you had to process, buy, store, etc., etc. So yes, we needed a handful of people to do, several handfuls of people to do that. It needed considerable planning. It needed considerable finance. And, we were never guaranteed of success. I mean, the lottery may have stopped that level of purchase at some stage during the process. That has occurred in other places to other people. The numbers could have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and there would have been 47 winners, and it would have been a financial disaster. But I think the mindset of people that will take on a project like that is not so much about the extreme outcomes, but what is the expected value of that opportunity. And the expected value was extremely good. So, everyone said, yeah, let's do it. And we did.
It's fantastic. Are you familiar with the movie Casino with De Niro going back sometime?
I think I watched it at some stage. I've certainly watched most or all of the casino and lottery and blackjack counting movies. But yes, right. I'm not super familiar with Casino at the moment, but tell me.
Well, there was a great scene in it that just sticks out in my head where they followed a chip on the table. Somebody buying a chip at the table, and they followed that dollar all the way back, in one shot, to the counting room and, where that dollar ends up. Can you kind of walk us through a little bit from the moment you guys said we're doing this to the moment of the drawing, the actual logistics of it, the getting the machines and the getting people in there? And it feels like a caper, right? Or at least a caper movie. I think it would make a good scene is what I'm trying to say. So was there a lot of physical movement that was involved here?
Yeah, look, I think you follow a lottery, you realize in Texas, And just to be clear, the ultimate prize was 95 million, but I think that's 95 million once we spent tons of money on it. And that's pre-tax and it's pre-lump sum and all of that. But regardless, it was something like, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, something like a 58 million payout for a 26 million spent, something like that. Now that's pre-tax, et cetera, but still a very good venture. I think, it starts with, there's a lottery in Texas. If you went and bought every ticket, every dollar is worth significantly more than $1. So that's the starting point of mathematically, you've got something that makes sense to do. Now, the question is, can you actually do that? So sometimes you might go there and you might find that it's a geography that has a responsible gambling regulation. Let's say, for example, something like Belgium, and you've got to give your national ID card and you can only spend $500 per day, per person per day. It makes spending $25 million in Belgium logistically impossible. Those sorts of restrictions weren't in Texas. Maybe they should have been. They certainly are now, but they didn't exist at the time. So you go there, you stress test, you go and buy 10,000 tickets in a shop. Is that acceptable? Does the lottery turn up? Do they say this is obnoxious or outrageous or whatever? We're not going to allow this. Okay, so you do that and you get a clean bill of health. You get a process where you can process tickets quickly and you get a clean bill of health. And you get to the point of saying, well, actually, can I get all of these tickets done in a 72-hour window? Yes, no. And you stress test, and then you build out the logistical process of, okay, how much money? Well, the money is absolute. There was 25 million perms. They were $1 each. How many tickets do I need? How many staff? How many terminals? How many hours? And you calculate all of that out and see if that's available to you. Stress test all the hurdles or rate limiting features of that system. And you get to a point where you think it's achievable and you hold on to your hat and push go.
Wow. Did you watch live the ticket being drawn?
We did watch live the ticket. Well, not live. I believe it was streamed, but obviously we weren't in the studio. But yes, we watched live and it was a sort of, there's actually a video. It's a little bit comical because they say, the first number is 17. And I call out, I think we've got that one. And the next number is 8. And I say, I think we've got that one as well. So there was a bit of sort of exuberance and comedy because we'd achieved our goal. We had got the tickets through the system. So in that sense, we had a small amount of volatility on our side. As I say, if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we're dead. There's 20 winners, but there was a semi-significant possibility that we would split it with the public. But in a world where we split it once, we were probably neutral, maybe a small loss, small profit, but close to neutral. So really, we just had to fade or swerve or whatever you want to say, a public winner. And public were probably bought about between 5 and 10% of permutations. So you had to dodge that 5-10% bullet, really.
I have so many questions about this. How long did it take before you found out you were the only winner? Was it the next day, I imagine?
I'm not entirely sure. I think I've got a recollection that we obviously found our ticket. So we rummaged through our 25 million tickets and found our one. So we had that in our hot little hand. So at least we knew we had it. We had it in our database. So we knew we intended to buy it. But, you don't have 100% accuracy in a logistical operation of buying 25 million things. I believe we were fairly confident that the public wouldn't have it because it wasn't full of birthdays and things like that. But I think we got sort of drip fed information. Like one of the shops said, we believe there's only one winner, but that wasn't confirmed. I think some information came to agents and terminals first before there was a public reconciliation or available information. But yes, it dripped out to us over a few hours. And then that level of confidence that we are only winner confirmed on the website, I think an hour or two later.
Logistically, just the actual purchase of the tickets is fascinating. Also, I guess you just, as you said, you created a database with every possible combination and you handed out the pieces of paper and said, here's the tickets you need to buy. Is that how else do you do it?
Yeah, you very much do it like that. You say, right, here's ticket 1, here's ticket 25 million, start buying. And you pass them out and you put them through machines and terminals, et cetera, et cetera. And, people make mistakes. They sometimes buy the same ticket or same batch of tickets twice. Occasionally they miss a batch. So you certainly can't have 100% efficiency when you're going for speed. And in that operation, we only finished our ticket purchasing, 35, 40 minutes before the draw closed. So we really kind of went down to the wire. Nobody slept. People were getting a couple hours off on the sofa in the spare rooms and stuff like that. But yeah, it was, and I don't remember exactly, but probably 40 people. I remember the Uber driver who drove me to the location we were purchasing tickets one night or one day, and we didn't really have enough staff. And I said to the Uber driver, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm going to drive an Uber for the next 8 hours." I said, "How much money are you going to make?" And she said, "I don't know, $70. And I said, "I'll give you $300 to work for me for the next 8 hours." The EV of that $300, she wasn't the fastest person in the room. We had to train her for the first hour, but she probably got, I don't really remember, but she probably got, I don't know, $200,000 of tickets printed in that time frame, which might have had a 50% edge. So, I paid her $300 and we got 100,000 of EV out of it, something like that. So, it's all hands to the pump, really.
I got one more question about this specific incident. Physically, how much space, like what did all those lottery tickets look like?
Well, look, I think if you put them just in a small little pile like that, I don't know, it's probably 1 cubic meter or something small like that. But when you put them in folders and labeled folders and boxes, I don't really know, but I think we had about 150 bankers boxes or whatever you call them, like, boxes this big with labels on the outside, and they were all stacked up inside, a hotel room against the wall. So yeah, but I think if you took out all the tickets from the envelopes and everything, it'd probably only be a cubic meter or so of tickets.
Right. Now, and I guess this Texas lottery, I think it's just 5 numbers that are drawn. I'm going to say, quote unquote, manageable to buy all the permutations. But something like, for instance, like Mega Millions right now, it's kind of close to the same, near 4-to-1 payout. I think there's 290 million combinations right now. I think it's up to 965 million. But to buy 290, I mean, that would be a much bigger, I guess what I'm driving at. What price are you doing Mega Millions?
Look, a Mega Millions just has unsolvable logistical problems, really. It depends where you buy them. Sometimes you can use cash, sometimes you can't use cash, sometimes you can use transfers. Those sorts of complexities across, I forget exactly, but 9 or 10 or 15 states all merge into Mega Millions and Powerball. So you've got to deal with all of those logistics. If you look at the maths problems of both Mega Millions and Powerball, one of your issues there is that there's significant public interest. So as the prize escalates, the public participation escalates, and obviously that leaves less advantage for an advantage player. We did do a calculation at one stage for one of them. I forget which one it was, Mega Millions or Powerball. It was before they changed the price of them, etc. But, we did a theoretical that I think it got to 2 billion about 3 years ago, one of them. And I think at that 2 billion, we would have mathematically been happy to spend, I don't know, something like 400 million buying half of the tickets that were available. But we would have needed, two things, 400 million in cash. I'm not even sure, Bill Gates or Elon Musk could convince a bank to, I don't even know where you would get 400 million in cash as your first problem. And you would have needed about 7,000 staff, so I think that was the end of that ambition.
I almost hesitate to ask this, but has this gone down as like the most batshit crazy thing you've accomplished? Or is there something even better?
I mean, I think there's been more volatile things, because I think the volatility of this objective, the volatility would have occurred if you could only buy half. Then you would have had like $15 million on an even money chance to pay 2-to-1. Well, that's a pretty crazy bet. So it was kind of smoother by managing to get most or all of the tickets. Look, I've done so many things over the years, between playing football jackpots, racing jackpots, casino table games like 3-card poker jackpots, etc., etc. I think it was probably the most logistically ambitious thing I've probably done. I think it wasn't the best maths we've ever done. When it leaked out on social media, everyone said, I thought about that. And indeed, many people said, oh, look at that jackpot. It's bigger than the number of permutations. It's schoolboy math. But, schoolboy maths is just the very beginning of getting something like that done.
It is just tremendous. It's such a fascinating story. More quote unquote boring stuff is your day to day. You're not like buying, 25 million lottery tickets. I mean, so correct me if I'm wrong, but White Swan and iBankroll is part of White Swan, correct?
Yeah, it's in the same umbrella of companies.
All right. And just explain it to me like I'm 5 years old, exactly what iBankroll is. I think I understand, but I want you to tell me.
Yeah, so I think if you look at iBankroll, you've really got to understand, before you understand what is the purpose or need of iBankroll, you've kind of got to understand what the gambling landscape looks like at the moment in the world. And you've got your DraftKings and your FanDuel at the sort of top of the regulated market, and the Bet365, they're sort of, and some others like Tipico and Bwin and more gray operators in Asia, but they're sort of the regulated fiat market. And then you've got the crypto market, predominantly stake, a little bit of shuffle, sportsbet.io, etc. And you've got sort of two things in this market. You've got a person, and you have to separate those two markets to another extent as well, in that a regulated market generally, but not explicitly, tends to have more limits and more responsible gambling type things. So you can't, but it's quite hard to go on to a fiat casino in America or Europe or, well, not Australia because I don't have fiat online casinos, and have $100,000 on a blackjack box, where this is entirely normal on the two or three biggest crypto casinos in the world. So you look at the market share of big casinos and you look at what is a limitation for another casino coming along and taking some of that market share. If you go to fiat, they need a license. They need to go through all the regulatory hurdles and hoops and jumps and everything. They need branding. They need legal. So, it's a really hundreds of millions of dollars enterprise to say, I want to go and try and do some sort of competition with FanDuel or DraftKings or Bet365. You've got to really grow that up from the ground over several years, if not decades plus. Whereas in the crypto space, you've got the rapidly advancing ability of supplying casinos to people. You can go to someone like Maincard or Whale.io today, and you could have Jeff Edelstein's casino up and live in 5 days' time. But your problem if you do that is, with due respect, who are you, Jeff? And are you going to pay me if I have $100,000 on a blackjack win or $1 million on a slot win? So your credibility problem is, are you going to get paid? So you want to enter the market. You want to get the business of stake, which is really the dominant player. And the main reason why people won't switch is a lack of credibility that you will pay them. Not you personally, but any one of the 4,000 casinos that have entered the crypto market and are trying to become prominent in the business. So the idea of iBankroll was to give them that credibility on day one. So now if you're a casino and you're new and you're open 3 days and you say, great, we are Shitpot Casino 247, but we're banked by iBankroll. Well, we're now building a decentralized or centralized, depending on which way you want to interpret that word, credibility that you're going to get paid. If you bet with an iBankroll casino, you're getting paid. They've got big risk limits. You can be safe in those risk limits. They're underwritten by iBankroll Group and iBankroll Risk Management, and you're going to get paid. So now your switching costs, you can literally be betting on Evolution, Baccarat, VIP Table 2 on stake. You can log out and in 40 seconds be playing that on BetBolt for the same limits with the same confidence you're going to get paid. So the idea was to make switching costs, at least on risk profile of getting paid, zero.
I'm going to sound like such a moron here, but obviously the risk management side and the money side, like where your risks lie. I mean, I imagine speaking of White Swan, there must be Black Swan event worry at the tail end of this, or you guys are covered no matter what happens?
Look, I think it depends what you do. Like if you're putting, and iBankroll generally puts $500,000 limit on a Baccarat hand, 100,000 on a blackjack box, $1 million win on a roulette spin, something like this, and $20 million on a slot win. Look, can someone win 3 or 4 slot wins in a row? They can, but I'm more likely that a meteor hits me tomorrow. So how do we deal with that? You deal with it with limits. You deal with it by having a large bankroll, and you deal with it by saying, well, are we really going to Are you going to have a bankroll that manages an event that happens once in 5 million years? I think that's absurd in some senses. But are you having a bankroll that manages everything, 3 times over that can happen in a 5 or 10 or 30-year period? I think absolutely you have to do that. So yes, we look at all of that and we make sure that we're super robust in our risk management between our bankroll and the risk profile across those casinos. Now, of course, the more casinos that join that, this one's going up while this one's going down, this player's winning while that player's losing. And then ultimately, while all those individual casinos have significant volatility, the central banker, I think in some senses, like, a Lloyd's of London or Insura or whatever, the more diversity you have, you are really kind of removing those black swan events. And just to be clear, we can't really have something like a typhoon or COVID or something like that. There's nothing that, there's no real way that the whole world decides to bet on red on the next roulette spin and we lose $1 billion, because they are all completely independent humans on independent casinos on even different wheels. So that correlation risk that an insurer might have, like the Californian insurers for the tragic wildfires, there's correlation risk there. We almost don't have that. We almost have the opposite of that in our business model.
Do you deal strictly with crypto casinos or anyone that wants to work with you?
Anyone who wants to work with us, I think, not exclusively, but generally a lot of the regulated markets have introduced so much responsible gambling that volatility of a VIP player doesn't really matter. You would assume FanDuel with a $40 billion balance sheet don't need risk management of a $100,000 blackjack hand. Their bigger problem is, do they work in a regulatory world which allows a $100,000 blackjack hand? And if they do, they probably just take it on the balance sheet. But it's much more to do with the smaller emerging casinos, because imagine you own a casino and you say, right, I need $2 million for marketing, I need this and that, and you're diluting yourself by raising that capital. If you then have to go and raise $10 million so you can take on VIP players, or $20 million, you're diluting, where in most worlds you're never going to need that $10 or $20 million. So you're really stuck in an awkward place. If you don't have bankroll to take a VIP player, you can't really get any significant market share, because it's very driven by large volume VIP players. And if you don't have bankroll, well, you're going to succeed and just bleed away on marketing spend. So you dilute yourself by getting bankroll, or you starve by not being able to take a VIP player. And we solve that problem additionally by giving that credibility, because the only people that could open a casino and have credibility to pay on day one, you'd have to have Elon Musk say, this is Elon Musk's casino, you're getting paid. Stake pay. The Australian guys, they built over years credibility of, you're going to get paid, you're going to get paid, you can win 10 million, you're going to get paid. There's very few people that could get that instantaneously the day they opened a casino. So we are trying to aggregate that reputation into iBankroll, rather than all the fragmented individuals trying to prove that themselves.
It's interesting because crypto casino has kind of like flown very under the radar here in America because it's basically illegal. Do you see a world in which that ever changes?
I'm very bullish on the growth of crypto casinos for a few reasons. I think ultimately, if you try and stop a person doing something they want to do, they're going to find a way to do it. And if you're in the UK now and you want to deposit more than $500, you need a bank statement, you need this, you need that, you need your passport. And lots of people just don't want to hand over that stuff or spend the 30 minutes it takes to drag all that stuff together. So fortunately, unfortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, those people are going to say, well, what are my other alternatives to gamble? And one of those alternatives is to go to an offshore operator, and particularly an offshore crypto operator. And I think as more and more people become crypto savvy and fiat gambling regulation around the world is generally getting stricter, I think you're going to see a massive growth, in an even bigger growth than we've seen in the past, of crypto casinos.
Yeah, I think as a podcaster covering the gambling industry, I'm contractually obligated to ask you what you think of prediction markets, which are all the current, that's what anyone's talking about here in the States. Do you see any window of opportunity for you or your company there?
Yeah, look, I think, the States is a very sort of interesting roadmap. When you look at a lot of the world, the regulation is fairly clear, fairly generally broken into one or two bet types. You have casino, you have sports betting. There's not really something else in most worlds. A little bit of exchanges in Europe. If you look at America, you've got prediction markets. You've got Dean Sassoon doing ProfitX. You've got Tarek doing Kalshi. You've got exchanges with Alex doing sports trade. You've got historical horse racing. You've got horse racing. You've got virtual gambling worlds doing sweepstakes. You've got my own firm, Colossus Fantasy, doing pick'ems. You've got sports betting. You've got iCasino. You've got bricks and mortar casino. You've got insurance contracts. And they're all doing the same thing, really. And then once you've got those 10 options or 15 options to have a bet, then they're not even consistent by state basis. So I think it's funny, because when Betfair started in 2004, which is they started in about 2001. I kind of found them in about 2003. And that was my entry back into gambling, because I grew up in gambling, but I was off because gambling was declining. The internet hadn't started. And I thought, there's no 30-year career in gambling. I was off to biotech. The exchanges came in the UK and they were gigantic. I thought they're just going to put bookmakers out of business. It's intuitively the most pure way to bet on something. Go to an exchange. The price is not what price is a Tesla share. The price is what price is the Patriots. What's the Patriots probability? And it was a stock that just expired in 4 hours. And it was a binary stock. So I thought that was the correct way. Now, I'm not a politician. I don't know what's going to happen with Trump and prediction markets and state laws. And I'm getting flooded by the lawyers' opinions on LinkedIn about this state and this lawsuit and this lawsuit and some other lawsuit and some other district attorney. And don't worry, it's Trump's kids sit on the board. He's going to smooth it all over. I don't follow all of that. But in a purist sort of way, I think prediction markets are fantastic. Whether they should be on sport or not, let the regulators and politicians deal with that. But I think if you go back to the prediction market, they failed in Europe. And they didn't fail because regulators pushed them out of business or said they're not a legitimate business. I think the retail person never really came to terms with them. You know what? I'm going to back something, and I know you might be a little bit better off by trading the percentage of the Patriots. You're trading 0 to 100. Betfair traded 101 to 1,000, so a price, but it's the same thing. What I had 87. I wanted $100 on it. I got $87. I've got $13 sitting over here. Where do I put the rest? What? It's a different price. And I think, and maybe they were too early 20 years ago. The other thing is when you economically look at that ecosystem, you've got to make sure that Kalshi, Poly, versus all of them are the main extractor of the economic loss of the retail player. And that's one of the reasons why I think the exchanges in the UK didn't work. They had a low-cost model where they were trying to encourage everybody in. The professionals were winning, the retail's lost money. The exchange were not charging the professionals enough, probably in the beginning. Then they got disgruntled. Then they introduced premium charge. Then the professionals got disgruntled and wanted to leave. And then the exchanges got disgruntled and took all the retail players and said, hey, retail player, don't bet on the exchange, bet on my sportsbook. So you ended up with a declining prediction market because the retail person who was losing, they fished out of the exchange market and put them on the sportsbook. So now you have to look at what's going to be the economic interest of Kalshi, Profit, etc. Is their economic interest going to be stay in exchange with the right price, with the right amount of extraction by sharps or smarts or pros or market makers, and the right amount of extraction by Kalshi? Or are they going to take the guys that are always losing and filter them off into a sportsbook? And if they're in a regulatory quagmire where they're not sure whether the sportsbook is legal or the exchange is legal or the prediction market is legal, they might be doing that to hedge their bets as well. So I think there's a world of complexities there for getting retail people involved, for the regulatory clarity over what's allowed, and then the economic decision of the person who owns the retail player. could blow that stuff up as well also.
I'm glad to hear you say that you don't know either, because I hate when people tell me that they do know, because nobody knows what's going to happen with this stuff. We're still, very early in the game. You mentioned something earlier I just want to touch on real quick, that you grew up in gambling. Tell me about that.
Yeah, look, my father is a bookmaker. So in Australia, a bookmaker would be one person at a race meeting with his price board. I remember when I was about, 7 or 8, and you go to school, what does your dad do? I said, oh, he's a bookmaker. And I vaguely remember thinking he actually made book when I was 5 or 6. By the time I was about 10 or 11, I was going to the races. I was running some prices, and I understood what a bookmaker was. By the time I was 14 or 15, I was doing Greyhound videos with him on the VHS, etc. He's still a bookmaker. He's 84. He's in Australia. I think he's been a bookmaker for 62 years or 61 years now or something like that. So a super longevity. He still loves it. He goes there. He was the Spring Carnival last week. He's coming home every day. This horse did this horse did that. There wasn't much retail. I got washed out, Bernard. We didn't make much money. And it's fantastic for him. He's super active, and I'm really glad that he is.
Does he understand what it is that you're doing exactly?
Oh, look, I think more than understand it. He taught it to me. When I started, he was the place bookmaker. So you had all the win market, which was in theory the big, robust, liquid market, and he was trading a derivative market. He was the place bookmaker. So his approach was always like, Bernard, you've got to have the best maths. You've got to be the best maths. And then you've got to have the best maths. You've got to have the best information. See that guy over there? He's a professional. See that guy? He's connected to that stable. See these guys? He's a degenerate. If this guy turns it off, he's got a link to some other professional or some other group or some other source. Now you've got to have the best information. And now you see a person coming out of the crowd, they want to have a bet. Get your hand out, get that money, get that into your business. So he was a very focused, driven, alert person. He didn't want to miss a customer. He didn't want to miss a snippet of information you could get out of the betting ring. And he wanted the best maths. And I think, I parlayed all of that into my sort of gambling and data career.
Growing up in Australia, I guess you were growing up in the 70s, 80s. Was gambling looked at as a reasonable way to earn a living in Australia? Or was it, in America, it was very much in the shadows. If somebody said that I was a professional gambler, then you would immediately think you're connected to the mob, it's a dirty business. Was it like that growing up? I mean, and did it form your thoughts on the industry in any way?
I don't really remember thinking that it was a gray or dodgy area. I think sort of globally, it's got a bit of mystique. It's like, hey, it's a little bit funny and gray, but oh, wow, how do you manage to do that? So I think you get a bit of a polarized opinion, and it's sometimes tricky. Like if you go to, parent-teacher night and the teacher says what do you do or something like that? Well, do you want to say I'm a professional gambler, or do you want to say I run a sports data hedge fund or something like that? So, I think there's different perceptions, but I don't think I've ever really felt in my life that it was gray enough that I wasn't kind of happy to say that, I were. Now, listen, I did banking, I did biotech, I did other things. But yes, it's been a predominantly constant in my life, and then the growth of the last 10 years.
I'd have to imagine, though, that while in banking, while in biotech, a lot of the principle, I guess it's hard to shake a gambling mindset, I think, where the edge is always, we're always looking for the edge. We're always looking for the way in. Am I barking up the wrong tree, or do you feel like your gambling background helps you in those other industries as well?
Oh, look, I absolutely got recruited into the banks by my Betfair trading. Everyone who interviewed me, they were my colleagues. I'd done an MBA at London Business School, and there's banks would come around and interview everyone, and everyone else was getting asked about Black-Scholes and how to price this and how to price that, what they thought about Alan Greenspan's monetary policy. I was just getting asked about what did my Betfair algorithm do, because every sort of person in banking in that time really wanted to be trading Betfair. So I think if you were a market maker on Kalshi at the moment and you applied to a Wall Street bank with a couple years of good trading experience on Kalshi, that shows that you're proactive and driven and self-starting, I don't think they care where you went to university. Now, I went to great universities, but I think you walk in. I think it's so similar. One of them does data analysis on will the Patriots win. One of them does data analysis on what price will the Tesla stock be tomorrow or next month. The only real difference between the two is the length of the contract.
I agree with you 100%. Do you ever turn, again, a lifetime spent in this world, can you and do you ever turn off your mathematical side of your brain and say, you know what, screw it, I'm going to sit at the roulette table and have a little bit of fun?
Not really. I mean, strangely, I was at G2E a month or so ago. I try to play craps for 45 minutes. And I think everyone who plays craps is a lunatic because, you ask the person next to you explain craps and I don't understand what they're telling me. Oh, you've just got to bet this and the come line and the that and the pass. And, he's done something and they all speak like super fast, every craps player I've ever met. So yes, at G2E, I lost $300 playing craps for 45 minutes, broadly trying to understand the process of the game. But, I reach over and I put a bet and they say, no, you can't have that bet in this stage of the game because he hasn't made the pass or something, but you can have some other bet. And I did my $300 and left.
Are you always, again, I'm guessing the answer is kind of yes, but is there a time when you're not looking for the next big thing, when you're not looking to find that edge somewhere?
Look, I think family time and stuff, but my son's 17, we often talk about these things together. I think your mobile phone, etc., is a constant part of your life these days. If I'm on a taxi going to the airport, I might be flicking through LinkedIn for all the new products that are being launched, thinking, is there a mistake in them? Following all the lottery notice boards or something of the world, looking at chats where people say, hey, the card counters are making a lot of money on this game that's playing late into the shoe or whatever. There's nothing, I don't ever think there's, it's funny, people go, oh, Bernard, you made money doing X or Y. We did that 25 years ago. Okay, well then why was the opportunity still there for me? Some of them were doing stuff in the 60s and 70s when, I wasn't born or I was 5. They seem to come back. An issue that was in a product 30 years ago in a bricks and mortar place or in a bricks and mortar casino comes into a product online. You've got to be the person who finds it first, monetizes it first, because ultimately, I think things that have abuse is the wrong word. Things that you can play with an advantage, I think ultimately get fixed, or they make your life difficult if you play them as a consistently advantageous way. So I think you've got to be switched on and find them early and then go from there. I was listening to one of your podcasts the other day. They quoted Jeff Ma. It wasn't a podcast with Jeff Ma, but the person quoted Jeff Ma. And he said the endless search for expected value is exhausting. It is, because you don't know where it's going to turn up. And you've got to look at a lot of games to find a mistake or an edge or an advantage. You had to look at, we monitored, 400 lotteries for 2 years before Texas popped up. So there's a lot of work that leads to nothing. And then sometimes you find things but are logistically not obtainable or not usable.
Seems like it's an industry where a lot of people are working very hard to not work very hard. I'm not going to ask you what I'm going to leave it here, but I'm not going to ask you what it might be. But is there something that you currently have your eye on that people don't know about?
I'm sort of in a world of diversification these days. I think one thing I learned was that, if you go back to 2004, everything I did was in my exchange trading, my prediction market trading, for lack of a better word. By 2012 or 13, that was a dead opportunity. I'm revisiting code and processes that have been turned off for 12 years because prediction markets may reinvigorate that whole space. So I think back then you were so secretive and say, I'm not going to tell anyone, I'm not going to get any help. I'm just going to protect this little thing for myself and milk it. But I think that what I realized is that if you expand and you diversify, leakage of IP becomes less of a problem. And a lot of opportunities are cyclical, that they go. So if you're a one-trick pony, I think you're in a world of pain. So definitely diversifying, but diversifying on the betting side, but now diversifying on the services side. If you think about betting, it's not a lot different from iBankroll. Understanding the volatility of games and the necessity of players to know they're going to get paid out. If you go and play a game that has an edge, you want to make sure you're getting paid. You don't want to win money because when you've got volatility, if you go to a casino and you card count blackjack and you lose and they say, thanks very much, we've kept the money. And the next day you go back and you card count and you win and they say, we're not paying you and giving you a trespassing order or whatever they give, you're dead, right? Because you had no EV. So I think diversifying into both sides of the equation and thinking, right, if you've got this amount of information and data for betting, for a sport, whatever, well, one thing you can do is bet that information. One thing you can do is sell that information to a media company. One thing is you can sell that price to a prediction exchange or a market maker or something like that. So I think my focus is growth and diversification at the moment. There's not, I can tell you right now, if anyone's thinking like, is it Alabama or Florida or something, there's not a Texas on the horizon. And I would say, generally that sort of opportunity, partially because we took advantage of it, is probably going to happen less often because, Texas don't let you bet more than, $1,000 a shot per day now. And, that kills the idea or makes it very hard, makes it a bigger challenge than the last time. And maybe one I'll do one day for fun, but it's not in my wheelhouse at the moment.
All right. Well, listen, next time you need some help buying 25, 30 million lottery tickets, give me a buzz. I'll pitch in.
Yeah, exactly. And if you can bring $2 or $3 million in your anorak in physical cash, that will definitely get your seat on the team.
Sounds like a plan. I'll consult with my banker after we're done here today. Bernard, again, thank you so much for doing this. Thanks so much for your candor. It's real entertaining and enlightening conversation, man. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Talk soon.
The Business of Betting podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. 4 out of the top 5 U.S. operators personalize player experiences with Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/businessofbetting. And if you like what you see, you will get your first month free.